Joining us now, Brad White, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Transportation. Morning, Brad. Good to see you, my friend.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Well, how long you been over there in that role now?
Just shy of 3 months.
Okay. And that's glad you could come on and give us kind of an update. You've settled in?
Yeah, it's been very fun. You know, I started out there about 20 years ago.
Yeah,
with work for Dick Hall.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, it was kind of like going home. It was always an enjoyable place to be, a lot of really fine people, and just a good environment to work in. So I'm glad to be back.
Well, I think it was a good move. I think I'm glad you're in that position. I think it, as you know, it's a lot of money flows through there. Yeah. It's a big agency, and I think it's fair to say it touches every Mississippian and folks that come through Mississippi. So it's important to have good leadership there.
Yeah, $1.2 billion annual budget.
Right.
One of the larger state agencies of the state, just shy of 3,000 employees.
Wow.
Certainly our transportation system is one of the core functions of government, so it's very important to use the resources we have wisely and try to keep everything up to par.
Sure. And we should explain, Brad, because I'm not sure if folks are fully aware of how the funding mechanisms in the state work, but the $1.2 billion, that funding is in that fund is separate from the general fund.
It's primarily, it's a special fund agency.
Right.
The Department of Transportation is. It's primarily fuel tax revenue.
Yep.
About half of it, roughly, comes from the federal government in way of reimbursements from the fuel tax. We receive another $308 million from state funds that are fuel tax, and then there's other fees and taxes that are associated that comes that's added into that. And then recently the legislature's given $80 million a year in lottery money that you're familiar with.
Yep.
Then all of those things added together, you arrive at around $1.2 billion in revenue.
So how are revenues looking for the fiscal year? Well, we're about to end. We just ended a fiscal year. Now we're in a new fiscal year, about 3 months into it.
Yeah,
how are we looking?
We're projecting the same. MDOT's had about the same budget for some time. You know, the revenue stream, as you know, has been somewhat flattened. That's one of the discussions I'm hopeful that we can have is what type of mechanism do we want in place to fund our transportation infrastructure?
Sure.
I think that, the first things you look at is within the agency and within the system itself, and how can monies be spent more wisely. We have roughly $25 million of fuel tax a year that goes to non-transportation related issues.
Is that by statute?
By statute. Other state agencies receive some things like beaver control, money that goes to Department of Development, Mississippi Development Authority to help provide for welcome centers, things like that.
Yeah.
So I hope that we can have a meaningful discussion with our legislative leadership and how we're funded, and looking at how more of that money can be put to true transportation infrastructure needs. And then other efficiency measures, from fleet management to whether or not we want to have welcome centers. Should that be something that's privatized? All of those type of things that could result, hopefully, in cost savings in the way that we operate, and that money go to more traditional needs of the infrastructure.
Who are our committee chair on the House and Senate side?
Representative Charles Busby from Jackson County chairs the House Committee of Transportation, and then Senator Jennifer Branning from Neshoba County chairs the Senate Committee. And both, I believe, I'm almost certain I'm right on this, both serve on appropriations in the respective chambers and handle our appropriations bills and chair the authorizing committee.
Do you have any particular legislative priorities or anything that you're sort of stacking up and planning to work with them on?
Well, Friday we give our budget proposal to the Legislative Budget Office, make that to the committee that Lieutenant Governor Hoseman chairs.
Yeah.
We've been in conversations with Senator Branning, Chairman Busby, about things that we just mentioned, about maybe some of the funds that's been diverted out of fuel tax for non-transportation related items. Maybe we should look at those things being funded from the general fund and allowing that money to be directed to pure transportation type projects. Excuse me, there was a couple of years ago the legislature, through law, mandated that the state auditor, Shad White, conduct a performance audit of MDOT. That was done. I've been reviewing a document about that thick. Happy to say, by and large, it showed MDOT in a very positive light. There obviously were a lot of areas identified where efficiencies can be made,
sure.
Many of which, or most of which, would require some type of legislative fix that would allow us to do things like that. So we're pulling all of those out and plan to provide that to our legislative leadership to show them how they can help us better manage a more efficient agency. To give you an example, Alabama DOT is pretty much has a notoriety around the state, around the nation, as doing the best with their fleet management. When I say fleet, I'm not talking about just trucks or a car you may see, but the dump trucks, the bucket trucks, any type of equipment that would have a tag and title that would follow into that. In Mississippi, we run everything until it's just in the ground.
Yep.
Alabama has a different system to where they try to buy things, use them, and then get rid of them while they still have a value that could be put to the replacement, and then saving the cost on mechanics and other types of issues like that. Yeah. And it's a model that's been tried and true, and something that might be worth us looking into to determine if we wanted to try to go to that. Obviously, shrinking the size of that fleet on any underused or unneeded vehicles would play into that. But little things like that I think overall, if you made those type of tweaks, our intention would hopefully be that it would free up some money that we wouldn't otherwise have.
I at the risk of getting a little political on you here, there are strong feelings on both sides of the argument for and against additional fuel taxes in the state. And I think it's fair to say that Governor Phil Bryant called a special session in, I believe, August of 2018 to get a lottery passed because of the inability to get a fuel tax done. And he thought, well, he was always a proponent of a lottery, and he thought, well, this is a way to get that done, and we can allocate the funds, the net proceeds, to transportation. And to the state highway fund.
By the way.
Yeah, $80 million a year by statute, and we hit that both years. So I guess my question is that there are some who say, gosh, our infrastructure is absolutely crumbling. It's horrible. We need more fuel taxes to improve that. And there's others that say, no, our infrastructure is not that bad. We don't. I guess I'm just asking you as the executive director, Brad, give us kind of a grade on our infrastructure.
Well, I think we have a good system.
Yeah.
I think that Mississippi is primarily a maintenance state. Here about close to 10 years ago, we pretty much, the Department of Transportation, stopped doing capacity projects and reverted to rehabilitation and other types of projects like that. You certainly want to protect your investment as for the taxpayers.
Sure.
I think that there is certainly a place. I mean, when you looked at, if we were to sit here now and say, what would it take to address all the paving needs in the state? We have about a $400 million gap in that funding now. What about bridges? That's another couple of hundred or several millions of dollars in a gap funding for that. But when you talk about how we're going to fund, what mechanism are we going to use, fuel tax in and of itself may not be the right answer. I mean, you look at how many automobile manufacturers go into electric cars.
Yep.
You look at the drones that are being used now for delivery mechanisms and things like that.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of people that want to find a quick fix, and raising that fuel tax might be the way to do that. I think the more important conversation to have is what money do we have available to us now that can be repurposed and put to better use, and then what do we want the future to look like? How do we want to protect this investment, continue building, and make sure that we pay for it? You know, and when I worked in Washington, the Highway Trust Fund would come up with a deficit. Well, Congress never raised a fuel tax, not during any of the time that I was there. They just funded that deficit through the general appropriation and plugged that hole to keep it from doing it. So I do think that there's a need for discussion of that to be sure that we're providing the necessary resources to equip the agency to meet its mission. How we do that, though, there may be different paths that get there.
Well, first, that makes perfect sense to me. That's the most rational, I think, analysis, honestly, and fair analysis I've heard of that issue, absent the hyperbole and the emotion. And I think you're the right guy for that. So,
well, I appreciate that.
Appreciate you coming on today, Brad.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. Brad White, he is the Executive Director of MDOT. We'll be right back with more here on